today and across Europe in the weeks ahead that we are not walking away from our European friends. Britain will remain an outward-looking country and Germany will remain a vital partner and a special friend for us.
Irrespective of the decision that the people in the United Kingdom have taken to leave the European Union, we are linked by very close bonds of friendship, of partnership. Our two countries have always acted on a basis of very clear and firm and similar convictions.
It wasn't the PM's first challenge today. No Prime Minister heads into question time without jangling nerves. She just didn't show it. Made it look almost like a normal day at the office, though round Westminster, normal seems a long time ago. Started by teasing the other side about who really delivers equality.
In my years here in this House, I've long heard the Labour Party asking what the Conservative Party does for women. Well, just keeps making us Prime Minister.
Went well enough and got better when a veteran Leave campaigner told her this.
We're leaving the EU and we're going to make a success of it.
He wanted free trade without too many conditions.
What we need to do in negotiating the deal is to ensure that we listen to what people have said about the need for controls on free movement, but we also negotiate the right deal and the best deal of trade in goods and services for the British people.
But was she backtracking on the Tory pledge to cut migration?
Can the Prime Minister reassure the people of Yorkshire that when we finally do leave the European Union, she will insist on keeping her original promise to get the immigration figures down into this country to the tens of thousands?
The vote that was taken in this country on the 23rd of June sent a very clear message about immigration, that people want control of free movement from the European Union.
Control migration. Did that leave room to do deals? Awkward, though, for the new PM to be reminded of her new Foreign Secretary's undiplomatic language in the past.
His description of black people as pickaninnies and why he questioned the motives of the US President Obama on his part Kenyan heritage.
She ignored that. Boris Johnson's past indiscretions the least of her problems. Her big post-referendum pledge?
The government I lead will be driven not by the interests of the privileged few, but by the interests of everyone in this country.
It was over. It had gone well. Watch carefully, you could see she knew it. But fairness for all will take decades, and the job of building a new place for Britain in Europe and the world has barely begun. A senior Number 10 staffer told me everyone's starting to realise Theresa is the one in charge. The new PM will set policy on Brexit, but the final outcome will not be decided by Theresa May. It'll emerge from hard political graft and countless negotiations over coming months and years. Getting these relationships off on the right foot is important, but it's the easy bit and just the start. This will be a long march, and it won't all be this harmonious. John Pienaar, BBC News.
Well, with me is Roger Boyes, diplomatic editor of The Times newspaper and former Berlin correspondent. Thanks for joining us. So, what do you think, having seen those two formidable women together for the first time as leaders?
Well, they're very similar, aren't they? They're the children of the manse, you know, vicar's daughters, just as Gordon Brown was a vicar's son. There comes a certain attitude to work and to duty and a certain boringness, and it all comes together into a certain attitude. And of course, they're going to work together quite well. The problem is whether Germany's national interests really do coincide with ours or not. And
they don't, presumably. I mean, does it help that Theresa May initially was a Remain candidate? She wasn't the one pushing for Brexit. You know, at the same time, both these leaders want the best for their countries, and ultimately that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, of course, Theresa May being a Remainer de-ideologised the discussion with the Germans and the rest of Europe. That helps. But don't forget, Brexit is only one small ingredient as far as Merkel's calculations go. There's going to be the French presidential election, which may well turn out to be quite a success for Marine Le Pen. The migration deal with Turkey might collapse. It's looking very vulnerable, very shaky, and then she has her own election in September 2017. And all of this is going to harden attitudes. It will also change attitudes towards immigration. So the whole nature of our discussion with Germany is going to change, and it's going to change so that it reflects Germany's interests rather than ours. And this is going to be quite a complex time. In fact, many would say this referendum came too early.
What about the personality question, the women question? I'm afraid I have to ask it because it is striking to see two women leaders. They're both thought of as, getting down to business, on top of the detail. Theresa May showing her, her strength really in the last week. Complete cabinet reshuffle here. You followed Angela Merkel pretty closely in your time in Berlin. How do you think she's going to play it?
Well, I must say I don't remember one single memorable press conference with Angela Merkel out of maybe 50 or 55 that I've gone to. She's absolutely capable of meandering, of dodging, of fudging, and making decisions in her own time and not in the face of the press. And if Theresa May has the same instincts, then we're in for a rather backdoor, behind closed doors style of government. This is not going to be a very public diplomatic event, this renegotiation.
Roger Boyes, many thanks indeed for your time. Thank you. Now, in the United States, a member of Donald Trump's campaign staff has apologised and says she is responsible for passages in a speech by Melania Trump, which copied parts of an address given by Michelle Obama in 2008. Meredith McIver issued a statement via Donald Trump's website apologising for the effect that the row has had on the whole campaign. Well, it's just the latest development from the Republican National Convention in Ohio, which has officially given Donald Trump its nomination to run for president. Well, the BBC's Gary O'Donoghue is there for us. Gary, the twists and turns already in this speech saga.
Yeah, Melania Trump's appearance on Monday night was going to be one of the highlights of this week, and it has turned out to be that, but not in the way the Trump campaign would have wanted, because scarcely has she stepped off the stage than she was accused of plagiarising Michelle Obama. Here's a comparison between the two so you get an idea of what the accusation was.
From a young age, my parents impressed on me the values that you work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond and you do what you say and keep your promise, that you treat people with respect. They taught and showed me values and morals in their daily life.
You work hard for what you want in life, that your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do, that you treat people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them and even if you don't agree with them.
We want our children in this nation to know that the only limit to your achievements is the strength of your dreams and your willingness to work for them.
We want our children and all children in this nation to know that the only limit to the height of your achievements is the reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
Now, Geeta, the Trump campaign for 36 hours tried to hold the line, rejected any suggestion that there was cribbage or plagiarism going on here. But today this statement's come out from one of the speechwriters. She says what happened is that in talking to Melania Trump, she became aware that she admired Mrs. Obama, had liked her for a long time, is what she said. And also that Melania Trump had read out some passages of Michelle Obama's speech to her over the telephone, which then at a later stage became incorporated into the speech. She said that she hadn't checked the words of Michelle Obama's speech herself, and for that she apologised. She had offered her resignation, which the Trump campaign, she says, would not accept.
We are expecting to see Donald Trump. How much do you think this whole affair has damaged his campaign?
Well, we're told, or we hear, that he was furious when this came out, and certainly the Trump campaign has spent the last day or so just trying to push back on this particular story rather than talking about the triumph of the speech, which was a good speech, well delivered, an attempt to sort of humanise the Donald Trump and his candidacy, if you like. So they'll be glad that there's some kind of line drawn under this. But look, it's hugely embarrassing. I mean, it's not very professional for a start. You expect people doing speech writing at that kind of level, that kind of effort, for a presidential campaign to check things out properly. And the second thing is that Donald Trump's pitch is that he is a million miles away from the Obamas and the Clintons. He has nothing in common with those people. And so to discover that actually his wife's been lifting, or at least a speechwriter on behalf of his wife has been lifting passages from Michelle Obama, doesn't do him any favours whatsoever. They'll hope that this will be a flash in the pan, that other things will come along to overshadow it, such as the fact that Donald Trump is now the nominee and will make his formal acceptance tomorrow night here in this arena in Cleveland.
Gary, for now, thanks very much indeed. Well, we have got, of course, much more on the Republican National Convention online, bbc.com/US 2016, or download the news app, as well as all the latest updates. There is also a look at Donald Trump's running mate, Mike Pence, who's speaking later today at the convention. Turkey has charged 99 generals and admirals in connection with Friday's attempted coup, just under a third of the country's top military officers. The government has now banned all academics from travelling abroad as the purge of state employees suspected of being connected to the failed coup continues. So far, more than 50,000 people have been rounded up, sacked or suspended. Mark Lone reports from Istanbul. You may find some images at the start of his report upsetting.
Watch the man rushing into the street, ready to die for democracy. New pictures from the coup attempt show a citizen throwing stones and then himself in front of a tank to stop it. Unbelievably, he picks himself up. Another rebel tank approaches. Again, he's prepared to sacrifice himself. Again, he survives. Injured but defiant, Sabri Unal says it was a duty to defend his country and the president.
We heard that the tanks were approaching while firing. All I could do was to respond with the 3 stones I had. Yet the tank did not stop. God protected our president. Without the 15 minutes he had to escape, it would have been a disaster.
It was close, Turkey almost slipping from President Erdogan's grasp. And he's hitting back hard, today discussing emergency measures with the Cabinet and National Security Council, expected to widen the post-coup crackdown on those behind it. Dragged to court, the men who tried and failed to get Mr. Erdogan last Friday, 13 soldiers who raided his hotel minutes after he'd fled. The crowd shouts for the death penalty, Victor's justice becoming dangerously close to mob violence. But education too is being purged. All university deans told to resign, another 35,000 employees suspended. It seems a conservative government is clashing with more secular, liberal academics. Every dean or university professor we've spoken to by phone has been too afraid to go on camera, fearing that any critical comment by an academic might be used to round them up. Free speech and thought are cherished by these universities. The worry is that post-coup Turkey will crush them. The students we found felt divided.
If the coup organisation has infiltrated within the university, then the government would want to cleanse them out, as they did in the army or the Interior Ministry.
All students will be concerned. The education system will collapse. Students will be prejudiced against those new deans. They will say they are pro-government. They will now give me pro-government education.
Government supporters on the Bosphorus today, but they mask the fear that an emboldened president is using what could be a moment of reconciliation to flush out his enemies. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Istanbul.
Well, we're joined now by Professor Alparslan Ozadem, the co-director of Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations at the University of Coventry. He's actually by webcam in southwest Turkey in Mulia. Thanks very much for joining us. Have you spoken to any academics who are faced with this ban now? What is your reaction to what the government is doing?
I haven't spoken to academics facing such a ban, but there is an overall feeling of anxiety amongst academics because the country is going through a fast-changing process, as you know, since the failed coup. And therefore, there is a sense of unknown at the moment. And so over the next few days, there will be a better understanding of what's waiting for the Turkish academia.
Are there lots of Gulen-linked teachers in Turkey?
Yes, there are. The Gulen has been running private schools in Turkey for a number of years. And they are private schools.
I'm sorry. Sorry, the line's breaking up, I think. Well, should we just give it one more quick go? Can you still hear us? Can you carry on? No, I'm sorry. We're going to have to leave it. Actually, we're having a breakup on that line. But thanks very much, Professor, for joining us. Obviously, seeing some pictures there, it is a very fluid situation in Turkey. We will keep you updated. Let's look now at some of the other news today. And police in Brussels have arrested a man accused of wearing a fake suicide vest in an attempt that led to a major security operation. The alert was triggered when a security guard reported seeing a man wearing a long winter coat with wires sticking out on one of the hottest days of the year so far. The US Attorney General Loretta Lynch has announced that the US Justice Department is looking to seize more than $1 billion in assets as part of its investigation into Malaysia's state fund. It claims the money came from 1MDB, a fund set up and overseen by Prime Minister Najib Razak, but he's not directly named in the lawsuit and has always denied wrongdoing. Firefighters have put out a huge fire that engulfed the middle of a 75-storey residential tower in Dubai. Flames and smoke were seen billowing from windows high up on the Sulafa Tower. There are no reports of injuries. This is the 5th time in recent years that a fire has broken out in a skyscraper in the United Arab Emirates. Heavy rain has disrupted the Chinese capital, Beijing, with hundreds of flights cancelled and some subway stations shut. All major rivers have reportedly breached their banks, and the government has issued an orange alert. Central and eastern China has been inundated this summer, killing more than 200 people. Now, Russia's Olympic Committee has ruled out a boycott of the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio following a report which accuses the Russian Sports Ministry of overseeing a programme of doping. The International Olympic Committee is considering whether to impose a blanket ban on the Russian team. The head of Russia's committee went ahead with confirming the squad, whilst its ultimate fate is yet to be decided.
I'm sure that you've been closely monitoring the events that have been happening recently. It is in those circumstances that the final lineup of the Russian Olympic team is being confirmed. And even though the Games will start in less than 2 weeks, quite a lot of issues remain unresolved. I'm sure you were following the Court of Arbitration meeting in Geneva yesterday. They were looking into the claims against the Russian Olympic Committee and 68 individual Russian athletes. The hearing was yesterday and the decision will probably be announced tomorrow. This decision will be crucial in determining whether our athletes will be able to take part in the Olympic Games.
Sir Elton John has spoken at the International AIDS Conference in South Africa about the need to unite in the fight against the disease. 1,000 people are infected every day in South Africa, and every day around 500 die. Microsoft co-founder and philanthropist Bill Gates was also amongst the high-profile speakers today. But let's hear from Sir Elton John first.
If you give people love and compassion, and you include them, like LGBT people, like intravenous drug users, like sex workers, like transgender people. You don't leave them behind. You leave no one behind in the human race. You include them all. If you don't, this campaign to end AIDS will be a disaster.
I am an optimist. I'm an optimist that we can bring about the end of AIDS. I'm an optimist about the tools. I'm an optimist about the incredible dedication by the people I see here. So we need to bring that all together. All of those strengths, all the people are committed to this. Only by doing that in a way that's, I think, proving more difficult than we expected, but if we do that, then we can turn this promise of an AIDS-free world from an aspiration into a reality.
Bill Gates there. Now, it's the time of year when, in the Northern Hemisphere, summer months at least, we often complain about how hot it is. It's been boiling here in London. But we all know that there is a trend for temperatures generally to be on the up. And today there's more evidence for that. Last month was the hottest June around the world in modern history, a record that's been broken for 14 consecutive months. While climate experts say it is part of a worrying trend, as our science editor, David Schuckman, explains.
Wow. Spectacular lightning in Scotland. This marked the end of our very brief heatwave. And this comes as scientists report that the world as a whole is seeing a record rise in temperatures, producing a wide range of impacts. In California, firefighters are struggling with blazes pushing into the Hollywood Hills. This was the scene yesterday. A heat wave has hit much of continental Europe this week. This boy in Spain tries to stay cool. And many tropical coral reefs have turned white, what's called bleaching, as the waters get too warm for them. So what do the latest figures about rising temperatures tell us about a planet that's getting hotter? Well, this graph from the American Weather Agency shows the period January to June every year from the 1880s, below average in the first half of the century, but then climbing pretty dramatically later. And in the last 6 months, it was more than a degree above the long-term average. If we take a closer look, you can see why scientists are surprised at the scale of the increase. Now, they say this is partly driven by the weather pattern El Niño, with warm water in the eastern Pacific, but also by the greenhouse gases from our pollution, which the Paris Agreement on climate change is meant to slow down. Scientists researching the climate say they've been warning for years that unless those greenhouse gases are cut, then temperatures will continue to rise, and the impacts are likely to become more severe.
I think we're scarily close to dangerous levels of climate change. We have a Paris Agreement now that says we shouldn't be exceeding 1.5 degrees centigrade of climate change, but unless we start removing emissions from the atmosphere in the next decade or so, that's a threshold we're going to exceed.
The fear is of more scenes like this, extreme weather in West Virginia last month, which made this town look like a war zone. Rivers reached record levels. Scientists say a warmer world is set to see more violent rainfall, and this year is on course to be the hottest on record. David Schuckman, BBC News.
We're just going to very quickly show you a little bit from the Republican convention, because Donald Trump, you might be able to spot him there in the melee, has just appeared. He's said a few words with Mike Pence, his newly announced running mate. Of course, today, in the last hour or so, we've just had an explanation about the speech given by Donald Trump's wife, Melania. Her speechwriter apparently saying that Melania had read out some of Michelle Obama's speech from 2008. The speechwriter had copied down some of the phrases, put it into Melania's final speech that we saw this week, and nobody had realised in the team that the remarkable similarities. Apparently the speechwriter offered her resignation, but Donald Trump's team did not accept that resignation. And we're seeing Donald Trump there, a barrage of cameras and hands, everyone wanting a shot of the new Republican presidential nominee confirmed in the United States at the Republican convention. We're going to hear from Mike Pence later today, we think, at the convention, and from Donald Trump himself. But you can see there the melee surrounding Donald Trump, and the start of this campaign really has been overshadowed by the chaos around Melania Trump's speech. They will, of course, want to put that behind them. We'll keep you up to date here on BBC World News. Thanks for watching.